He's 5'2" and he's 6'4". He fights with missiles and with spears. He's all of 31 and he's only 17. He's been a soldier for 1,000 years. He's a Catholic.
This reporter, Sam Melton, White Eagle, I'm back with you. We have another Just Say No's news update. Sam Melton here, your fellow reporter. And the Electronic Intifada. We're glad you are back with us. We got a great show waiting for you. Your mediator and reporter, Sam Melton, White Eagle, I'm with you again. And we're getting ready for another great show of Just Say No. Keep watching.
We know that an Israeli tank fired at least 335 rounds at a civilian car at Hind Rajab, a 5-year-old, and 6 members of her family from a range of just 13 to 23 meters away. The Red Crescent, which had Hind on the phone for close to 3 hours, was waiting for approval to try and go rescue her. And finally, they get approval from the Israeli military. The Israeli military issues an approved route with a map. 2 emergency workers with the Red Crescent go in an ambulance along that route. When they reach the destination, Israel fires a tank shell at them. It's a direct hit and kills both of them and destroys the ambulance. Then the Israeli military continuously lied afterwards. It repeatedly denied it had any tanks operating in the area, even though there's clear satellite images that show multiple tanks in the area on that day. Even though we hear a recording of Hind's cousin, Layan, 15-year-old Layan, saying there's a tank right next to her right before she starts screaming as a hail of bullets from the tank murders her. And then we have 5-year-old Hind, hours of recordings of her, saying also that there's a tank right next to her before her voice eventually fades away and she dies. So we don't need to wait for an Israeli investigation to know what happened here.
Sharif, you've set that up so movingly. I want to turn to an excerpt of your Al Jazeera English documentary, The Night Won't End, which takes an in-depth look at these attacks on civilians by the Israeli military in Gaza, including on Hind Rajab and her family. Let's go to a clip.
Eventually, relatives were able to reach the Red Crescent in Ramallah to see if their team in Gaza could send an ambulance.
We received an appeal that the car had been targeted in Fares gas station in Gaza City.
When Omar called, it was Layan who picked up.
Hello, dear.
They are shooting at us.
Hello.
They are shooting at us. The tank is next to me.
Are you hiding?
Yes, in the car. The tank is next to us.
Are you inside the car?
Hello?
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 Hello? A girl dies while she's on the phone with you. I disassociated. I reached a stage where I was just mentally cut off. I'm trained for situations like this, but when it involves a child, your emotions get all mixed up. After calling back the same number that Layan answered, the voice sounded different this time. So I asked her, the girl that was speaking with me, where is she? She told me, she's dead. Who am I speaking with now? Hind?
انت تخبي انت وين موجودة بالضبط في السيارة؟ انت في السيارة قاعدة؟ طب تخبي تحت الكراسي ما تبيني بالمرة.
After a few minutes, Omar asked other colleagues to help and speak with Hind.
The tank is next to me.
The tank is where?
Next to me.
The tank is next to you?
Yes.
Is it moving or still? Did anyone come out of it?
It's moving.
It's moving? Okay. Is it moving next to the car, behind the car, or in front of the car?
In front of the car.
The tank is coming towards you from the front of the car?
Yes.
Is it close?
Very, very.
And it's moving?
Yes. Come get me.
As the Red Crescent dispatchers spoke with Hind, colleagues were trying to get an ambulance to her, something that would require coordination with and approval by Israeli authorities.
Usually ambulances in the whole world, once they got the call, they directly dispatch the ambulances and send to save people's life. Unfortunately, this is not the case in Gaza.
Come get me.
Any area that there is Israeli occupation forces, Israel considered as it is a military zone. That means even if there is wounded people, people who are killed and need to be evacuated, we are completely denied access to these areas, and if any ambulance try to reach, it will be targeted. That's why in order to be able to save Hind, we had to coordinate our safe access.
That last voice was Nebel Farsakh, the spokesperson for the Palestinian Red Crescent, explaining how emergency medical teams in Gaza need to get clearance from Israeli authorities before going in to rescue Hind. They eventually do get clearance. Let's turn back to the documentary The Night Won't End to see what happened next.
Finally, nearly 3 hours after requesting clearance, the Red Crescent says Israeli officials gave the approval for the ambulance to go to the scene and provided this map with an approved route.
We had to wait almost 3 hours until the green light was given. So they sent a map with a route, which means it identifies exactly which route the ambulance should take. And once we received the green light, the ambulance was dispatched.
أحلى خبر في الدنيا من عمو عمر.
هند هنود هاي دقيقة واحدة بتكون السيارة عندك بس بتمشي شوي شوي.
محطة فارس وين وصلت؟
The two paramedics who started driving to the scene were Ahmed Al-Madhoun and Yusuf Zeno. By the time they left, the sun had set.
Can you see the car? I can't see a thing here. Do you have your siren and flashing lights on?
Just the lights, not the siren. Oh, there it is.
The connection to the ambulance was lost right after that loud noise.
يا زينب.
هند بخير؟ الحمد لله الحمد لله. بخير هي بخير.
They had to ask her, did you hear a bomb now? Did you hear anything around you? And she said, yes, I heard it. Her yes means our colleagues who went to rescue her had died.
That clip from the award-winning documentary, The Night Won't End. Sharif, as you said, so much about this case is very well known. Hind Rajab is one of the most visible victims of the genocide in Gaza. There's even a film made about her, the voice of Hind Rajab. Why now? What is so significant about, what is new about this new investigation, and how much does it have to do with the International Criminal Court's investigation?
I mean, it's unclear why now. I think it's because Israel is coming under more international scrutiny. There's more criticism of the genocide. There is more political pushback from its backers in the United States and Europe, or from some corridors of power within those countries. And also, when a state says that it's investigating itself, this shields it from international law accountability if those investigations are found to be credible. So it may just be a push around that. And again, as you mentioned, these are, the Red Crescent massacre, the aid worker massacre, and Hind Rajab are among the two most high-profile incidents. And I think we should talk about, the massacre of the aid workers, the other case that they're looking at. This was 15 Palestinian aid workers from the Red Crescent, from civil defense, that were massacred in Rafah in March of 2025. And their bodies were buried in a mass grave. The ambulances and the fire truck and the vehicles that they arrived into the scene were flattened and buried alongside them. And in the aftermath of this, the Israeli military, again, lied about it and was forced to change its story several times following the discovery of the bodies and the vehicles in this mass grave and the emergence of video and audio recordings taken from the bodies of the dead aid workers from their phones. The group Forensic Architecture and Earshot did an incredible report around this just a few months ago, using video and audio recordings about the incident and open source material, as well as satellite imagery and interviews with the two of the survivors. And they reconstructed what happened. And essentially what happened was an ambulance went to a scene, they were fired on, and then a 5-vehicle convoy of ambulances and a fire truck and the rest of the aid workers went to go and try and find them and rescue them. And Israeli soldiers, over the course of a couple of hours, fired nearly 1,000 bullets. 1,000 bullets at these aid workers. And the findings showed that they were slowly approaching the vehicles on foot, the Israeli soldiers, walking while they were shooting, until they were as close as 1 meter away and essentially executing these aid workers in cold blood from point blank range, essentially. Then, as I mentioned, the Israeli military lied about it. They claimed initially that the vehicles advanced, quote, suspiciously towards the troops without their headlights on or without their emergency signals on. Then the video emerges, first published by the New York Times, showing the vehicles with their lights on. So they backtrack. They admitted that their soldiers from the Golani Brigade did fire on these aid workers, but they said that they had approached suspiciously and that they blamed it on poor night vision or something, that they couldn't really see them. And then they doubled down and said that 6 of the 15 aid workers were found to be Hamas terrorists. Just kind of ridiculous statements. And then it said, it buried them in a mass grave to prevent harm and clear the vehicles to prepare for civilian evacuation. I mean, I don't know how people are supposed to take this seriously. And as you mentioned, again, these are just 2 of the most high-profile incidents out of countless war crimes in Gaza. We're talking about over 20,000 children killed. We're talking about starving Palestinians being gunned down as they're searching for food, of an unprecedented number of journalists killed, over 270, many of them, openly assassinated. We're talking about displaced families being bombed in their tents, of hospitals, nearly every hospital being attacked, of mass graves being found in the courtyards of the hospitals afterwards, of the torture of prisoners, of sexual assault. I mean, we could go on and on. So I don't think that these investigations that were announced are anything more than political theater, and I don't think anyone's really taking them seriously.
Sharif, last week was the 1-year anniversary of the killing of Al Jazeera journalist Anas Sharif, along with 5 of his colleagues, and a collective of media workers called the Writers Against the War in Gaza have launched an online memorial to Anas and over 250 journalists who have been killed. It's called The Living Record and includes testimonies from Palestinian journalists in Gaza remembering their slain colleagues and friends. As we talk about accountability and the possibility of it within Israel for Israel's crimes in Gaza, your final thoughts on, what is going on in terms of investigating the deaths of journalists in Gaza?
I mean, very little is going on. What we're seeing, and as was the case of Anas Sharif, one of the most prominent journalists to be openly assassinated, is that Israel has keeps killing them in actually a more brazen way. Israel has reached the point where it is preemptively targeting journalists. So it put Anas al-Sharif, for example, who was murdered on August 10th of last year, in a media tent along with 5 of his colleagues outside of Shifa Hospital. It put Anas al-Sharif on a hit list in October of 2024, along with 5 other journalists from Al Jazeera, including our colleague at Dropsite News, Hossam Shabet. And it said that these are not journalists, these are terrorists, these are militants, and we're going to kill them. And it has killed 2 of them. And after it killed them, it bragged about it. It bragged about killing this prominent journalist and said that this wasn't a journalist. It said, don't let the press vest fool you. It did the same with Hossam Shabet. It just killed, during a so-called ceasefire, 2 brothers working for Al Jazeera at different times. One a correspondent, one the cameraman. Killed them both, called them both Hamas terrorists. So it is not, there's not even a semblance of an investigation. There is open bragging about the killing of these journalists. And let me just say that that tribute site that was put together by Writers Against the War in Gaza is very moving. I would encourage many people to go to it. You can click, I think there's over 50 now journalists who are profiled there, and you can listen to their colleagues, their mentors, their family members, talk about them and discuss who they were and talk about their importance and what they meant to them. And so it's a very fitting tribute to these journalists in Gaza, Palestinian journalists who have performed the most heroic act of journalism in our lifetime and should be remembered for their bravery.
Sharif Abdul Quddus is an award-winning journalist and the Middle East North Africa editor at Dropsite News. Sharif, please stay with us. Coming up, we'll look at how Israeli settlers are laying siege to the village of Qusra in the occupied West Bank.
جاهل عامل عاقل حاطط حاله حاكم عالدنيا واللي فيها غافل ولا سائل حافظ ولا فاهم جاهل عامل عاقل عقل عامل جاهل جاهل عامل عاقل عقل عامل جاهل سافل عامل عادل حاطط حاله حاكم عالدنيا واللي فيها الطمع در ما نفع الطمع فرق ما جمع الطمع در ما نفع الطمع فرق ما جمع الطمع در ما نفع الطمع فرق ما جمع الطمع 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 الطمع
Tama, greed by the Palestinian oud musician Huda Asfour, performing in our Democracy Now! Studio. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Anjali Kamath. We turn now to the occupied West Bank, where Israeli settlers are continuing to lay siege on homes in the village of Qusra, south of Nablus. The siege has attracted international attention in part because one of the homes is owned by a Palestinian American. The U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, surprised many when he recently described the siege as a, quote, horrific act of terror being committed by, quote, Israeli terrorists. Louis Reedy, who lives in Ohio, spoke to Reuters before he flew from the United States to the West Bank to protect his home there.
I have a lot of emotion in Qusra. I was born and raised in Qusra. My mother, 83 years old, still in Qusra. My sisters, my brothers, my nieces, my nephews, my cousins, my friends.
Shortly after Louis Reedy landed at Ben Gurion Airport in Israel, he received a video showing Israeli soldiers shaking the hands of the Israeli settlers laying siege to his home.
When I landed, my brother sent me this video. That's terrifying. That just happened like an hour ago. And they meet the soldier. They're shaking hands with the soldiers. That's just happening today. I'm going to stay in this house tonight. So I'm terrified. I'm asking the U.S. official, the embassy, to provide me protection and remove the settlers permanently from our village and my area.
Then, after Louis Reedy arrived back in the village of Kusra and reunited with his brother and other relatives, he raised an American flag on the roof of his home.
I came here to be present with him. I left my luxury home in America. I left my luxury vehicles in America. I left my wife and my 2 daughters. I left my business and decided to be here at my home, to protect it from the settlers to steal it, and raising the American flag to send the message to the American embassy and the U.S. officials that I am currently under siege and I need a protection.
Despite Louis Reedy's return, settlers have continued to confront the family. In this video, a settler is seen approaching and harassing Reedy on his own property.
You are a terrorist settler. You know that? You are a terrorist settler. It's garbage. You know what that means? You stink. You stink. Move. Move. Don't touch me. Don't touch me. Terrorist. You are a terrorist.
We go now to Kusra, where we're joined by Louis Reedy. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Louis. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing right now? Describe the scene. Do you still have settlers coming into your property?
Thank you for having me. Yes, this is my 4th day here in Kusra, in my house that is still under siege by the IDF and the settlers. The settlers still manage every day to pass by my house, and the IDF present and not doing anything to them. They're not arresting them whatsoever.
Your reaction, Louis, to the comments by U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, describing the settlers as, quote, Israeli terrorists?
Well, again, I appreciate Mike Huckabee condemned it and called them terrorists. And I've been in contact with the embassy that nothing has been done on the ground. And actually, I asked the U.S. embassy to send me a team to see themselves what's going on here in my own house, so themselves can see what's going on.
And what kind of protection have you gotten?
None. I'm not getting no protection here. I still fear for my life. I still fear for my family's life here. The IDF not even making it better here. They're not allowing us to leave the house. They're not allowing anyone to come to my house freely. If we need to bring food, we have to do coordination through the mayor of Kusra, and he has to call the Palestinian Authority, and then they have to call the Israeli Authority. It takes hours, if not days.
Louis, this area of Kusra has been under siege for months, and your home specifically for at least a week, if not longer. And when you reach out to the U.S. Embassy, I mean, you have the ambassador to Israel speaking out about this. What are they saying in response when you reach out for help? You have an American flag on your home.
That's right. This house has been under attack by Israeli settlers since January this year. It's been under siege for 13 days. We have reached the U.S. member of Congress, local office. I have reached multiple times the U.S. embassy that I need help. Yes, I raised the American flag to send my message to the American people, to the government of the United States, that there is an American under siege by the Israeli settlers. Needs help.
I want to bring into the conversation Oren Ziv in Tel Aviv. He's a reporter and photographer for Plus 972 magazine and the independent Israeli local news site Local Call. His most recent article is headlined, "Kusra is where Israel's lies about settler violence hit a wall." Welcome to Democracy Now! Can you talk about what are these lies? What did you see in Kusra?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've been to Kusra twice in the recent week. First, a week ago on Friday, where a group of activists tried to march to Reedy's house to bring food and water and medicine, and were blocked by the Israeli army and border police, the same army and police who allow for months the settlers to attack, to murder, to injured. Israeli human rights activists were severely injured there a few months ago. Houses were attacked and vandalized. Amir Ode, a young Palestinian, was shot there during the war against Iran. And this is all happening, of course, with the active support of the army and the police. So the first time I was there on Friday and we were blocked as journalists, also the activists that were coming, bringing the food, and the police and the army just let the activists leave the food near a few meters from the house, and later MK, Parliament member Ofer Kasif, managed to bring it in. The second time I actually managed to go in after waiting for a long time outside and talking to the army. And what I could see is the same reality that Luai is describing. Despite all the international attention, the media attention, the Americans speaking about it, the Israeli army and authorities are doing barely nothing to control the situation. The house is still under siege. Settlers are roaming around. And you know, myself as a journalist and many people are asking, does the army doesn't want to do anything, or under the political current situation in Israel, they can't do anything. They don't control the situation in the West Bank. And you know, and I think it's a hard question, but either way, the situation on the ground is that the house is under siege. You know, the army cannot deal with this 20, 30, 40 settlers that are acting very violently, attacking this property and others. And I think this is happening because of the support from the Israeli extreme government, but because of the perception that any settler, 10 years old, 15-year-old, 20-year-old, can do anything that he wants in the West Bank, putting an outpost, putting a siege, killing, attacking, going to all these tours or trips and harassing Palestinians. And soldiers are just not, they don't think about the option to put a limit to that. And even though that the chief of staff talk about it and the commander of the West Bank, and I think this story gained a lot of attention because it shows the current situation of the Israeli army, that they cannot deal with 5 or 10 settlers, but this kind of perceptions that settlers can do whatever they want and the army just have to support it is very, very strong.
And Oren, can you talk about this argument that, you know, Bibi Netanyahu is making, also to some extent Mike Huckabee, U.S. ambassador to Israel, that there's some sort of distinction between the settlers here, I believe Mike Huckabee called them unsettlers, and the vast majority of other settlers. And there also seems to be a distinction, you know, sort of good settlers and bad settlers.
Exactly. This is something Netanyahu doesn't give interviews to local media. He talks in American media. And when he's asked about this, he always said, this is a group of troubled youth. You know, sometimes he says 70, 150. But it's very, very clear. They can act like this because of the active support from the Israeli government that gives them weapons, gives them ATVs, like the ones they raid Reedy's house in Kusra and other houses. Because of Smotrich and Ben Gvir, the establishment of more and more outposts that are kind of front bases for this terror attacks. And they could not stay one day without the active support of the police that is completely controlled by Ben Gvir, by the army that is controlled by the settlers and by the extreme government. We did a story a few months ago about how the settlers, after since October 7th, they managed to ethnically cleanse dozens of Palestinian communities in Area C, mostly farming and herding communities. They just moved on, and they say it openly to Area A, to Area B of the West Bank, sieging houses, villages and town and taking over them. And according to our investigation a few months ago, they already took over tens of thousands of acres inside Area B and A that, according to the Oslo Accord and even according to official Israel, are under Palestinian control. So all this is happening with, like, this example, it's happening in 100 other locations in the West Bank. The thing is here, because even next to Abu Ridi's house in Jalud, the same tactic from the same violent outpost happened a month ago, that the Tubasi family was forced out. And the only difference here is that this brave family managed to slow down the process a bit with the decision not to leave, even with they had barely no food and water, with the violent attacks, the fact they're under siege. They insisted to stay. He came from the US and managed to get media attention, including mainstream media, even local mainstream media.
And I just want to go back to Louis Reedy, Palestinian-American, whose home in Kusra is under siege by settlers. Louis, why did you return from Ohio to your home in Kusra?
Well, I've been watching all the attacks on my house, on my brother and his son, on the live on my security cameras. I couldn't sleep anymore. I have to stay up all night, and the situation reached into a dangerous way when they completely blocked him off from food on August 9th. And I was talking to my brother, and I told him, you know what, I'm going to come and I will do whatever it takes to provide you food and supplies and end the siege and trying to protect you.
Louis Reedy, thank you for joining us. We will continue to follow the settler siege on your home in Kusra. Thank you also to Oren Zeev of 972 magazine. We will link to your new piece, Kusra is where Israel's lies about settler violence hit a wall.
There are stories from war that become headlines, and then there are stories that become symbols. The story of 5-year-old Hind Rajab is one of them. A little girl, a family trying to escape, a car caught in the middle of a war, and a desperate phone call that would eventually become one of the most haunting pieces of evidence from the Gaza war. More than 2 years after Hind was killed, Israel's military has now announced a criminal investigation into her death. And for the first time, the Israeli military has acknowledged that its troops fired on the car in which Hind and her family were trapped. So why does this development matter? And who exactly was Hind Rajab? To understand that, we have to go back to January 29, 2024. Hind was 5 years old. She was traveling with members of her family as they tried to flee fighting in Gaza City. Their car came under fire. Several members of the family were killed. Hind survived, but she was trapped inside the vehicle. And then came the phone call. Hind reached emergency workers from the Palestine Red Crescent Society. She was frightened, and for hours, emergency workers remained in contact with her, a child, alone inside a damaged vehicle, asking rescuers to come and get her. An ambulance was eventually dispatched to try to reach Hind, but contact with the rescue team was lost. And then, nothing. For nearly 2 weeks, Hind's fate remained unknown, until February 10th. When rescuers and family members returned to the area, they found the vehicle. Hind was dead. So was her cousin who had been in the car. And nearby, the ambulance sent to rescue her was found destroyed. 2 paramedics were also dead. In total, Hind's family members and the rescuers who had gone looking for her were killed. And the story immediately triggered international outrage. But there was another question. Who had fired on Hind's car? And what had happened to the ambulance? At the time, the Israeli military denied that its forces had been operating in the area when Hind was killed. That denial became central to the controversy because independent investigations later examined satellite imagery, video, audio, and the physical evidence around the scene. Those investigations raised serious questions about the Israeli military's account. And now, more than 2 years later, comes the extraordinary development. Israel's military has acknowledged that its troops fired on the vehicle carrying Hind and her family, and it has ordered a criminal investigation into the deaths. That is a significant change, because this is no longer simply a case of competing claims about what happened. The Israeli military's own review has now accepted that its forces were involved in the incident, The military says its fact-finding mechanism reviewed the case and identified alleged failures, including issues surrounding the coordination of the rescue operation. The case has now moved toward a criminal investigation. But that raises another question. Why did it take more than 2 years? And what exactly can a criminal investigation achieve now? That is where the Hind Rajab case becomes much bigger than the story of one child. It touches the central question surrounding the Gaza war. When civilians are killed during military operations, who is held accountable? Israel has repeatedly said that its military operates under international law and investigates allegations of misconduct. But human rights organizations and critics have argued that internal Israeli investigations have often failed to produce meaningful accountability. And that criticism has gained renewed attention following the latest announcement. Because Hind's case is not the only one, the Israeli military has also announced a criminal investigation into the deaths of 15 Palestinian paramedics in Gaza in 2025. At the same time, other high-profile cases have not been referred for criminal investigation. That includes the deaths of aid workers from organizations such as World Central Kitchen. And that distinction matters, because an internal review asking what went wrong is not the same thing as a criminal investigation asking whether individuals committed crimes. The first can identify mistakes. The second can potentially lead to prosecutions. And that is why Hind's case is being watched so closely. There is also another dimension. Hind was 5 years old. She was not a soldier. She was not a political leader. She was a child trying to survive. Her final phone call transformed her from one victim among thousands into a face recognized around the world. Her story was later immortalized in the film The Voice of Hind Rajab, which brought the case to an even wider international audience. But behind the headlines was a family asking a much simpler question. Why wasn't she saved? An ambulance was sent. Emergency workers were trying to reach her. And yet the child who had spent hours asking for help was eventually found dead. That is why the latest Israeli admission carries such weight. For years, the question was not only whether Hind had been killed, it was whether Israeli forces were responsible. Now, Israel's military itself says its troops fired on the car. The criminal investigation will have to establish exactly what happened, who was responsible, whether military rules were violated, and whether anyone should face prosecution. And there is an important distinction here. The announcement of an investigation does not itself establish criminal guilt. That will depend on evidence and the outcome of the legal process. But it does mark a major shift in the official account. And it puts the spotlight back on one of the most disturbing episodes of the Gaza war. Because wars are often told through maps, through missiles, through casualty numbers, through military operations and political statements. But sometimes one story cuts through all of that. A 5-year-old girl, a destroyed car, a ringing phone, and a voice asking, "Please come and get me." Hind Rajab's story has endured because that voice turned an enormous, complicated war into something painfully simple. A child was trapped. She needed help, and the world listened, but she did not survive. Now, more than 2 years later, the question has changed. It is no longer only, what happened to Hind Rajab? It is, who was responsible? And will this investigation finally provide an answer? That is what makes this development so important. Because for Hind's family, this is not history. It is a search for accountability. And for the wider world, it is another test of whether the laws of war mean what they say they mean, even when the victim is a 5-year-old child.
Hiding in this car in early 2024 alongside 6 killed relatives, 5-year-old Hind Rajab spoke on the phone to the Red Crescent, saying a tank was approaching. Rajab was found killed several days later. 2 paramedics who came to rescue her were killed too. Israel's military had not taken responsibility until today. It has opened a criminal investigation due to alleged failures in the coordination of the movement of the Palestine Red Crescent ambulance.
The fact that we're seeing this case investigated is clearly because of the attention that it's gotten internationally.
They are shooting at a car. Attention that included an Oscar-nominated docudrama. The IDF says it will also criminally investigate the killing of 15 people in a convoy in southern Gaza, including medics and a UN worker, but says it will not pursue 3 other cases of aid worker deaths, including the killing of 7 people in a World Central Kitchen convoy 2 years ago. Among the dead, Canadian-American Jacob Flickinger. The IDF cites the manner in which the vehicles were moving and says it was not informed of the presence of the charity's armed security force. In a statement, World Central Kitchen called the decision inconsistent with the full truth and deeply offensive. It is demanding an independent investigation. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
So-called settlers, no, not settlers, they're gangsters. They're gangs, gangsters, and terrorists. Ground missiles that they can, and with the projectiles, all supplied by America. Hello. And all trained by the Israeli army. The army comes when Palestinians who have just rocks, most of them have nothing, are being harassed by these so-called settlers. No, not settlers, they're gangsters. They're gangs, gangsters, and terrorists. Just like the gangs running around Haiti. These are gangs, my friend. Don't call them settlers. There's no respect here for these animals. No, I wouldn't call them animals. Animals are better than that. For these monsters, for these devils and demons. They're absolutely disgusting. And what they're committing is wholesale murder to rip off other people's houses and land. How long will you take this, America? When will this stop? When do you stand up and take back your democracy and your government? We need to spend money on our children and our education and our hospitals. We need to help the innocent Palestinians that are being terrorized by these gangs of terrorists. They are gangs. They are armed. And the Palestinians are not. They are not Hamas. The Israelis are liars, cheaters, and use propaganda to do their mischief and evil, evil violence of brutality. We need to stop it as soon as possible. I'm begging you, America, wake up. Go to the streets, protest, write your congressmen, write your senators. Stop funding Israel. Stop funding murder, rape, and genocide because they are committing rape. The settlers go in to have picnics and watch people, even babies, children, pregnant women being raped and sometimes by dogs. My God, how long will you support this, America? This is so terrible. This is so horrible. It's disgusting. It's a disgusting state of affairs, and it defames democracy, and it defames all my brothers who've had flags laid on their coffin. It is shameful. And this monster in the White House is not my president. Trump ain't my president. My last president was John F. Kennedy. I don't call this person. In fact, there's not one person I thought I could call Obama my president, but he failed completely. It's just so disgusting. It is so absolutely harebrained that we're letting our democracy be destroyed by a foreign power, Israel, and we're letting our politicians take Israeli money, which is treasonous. It's treasonous. Biden called himself a Zionist. That is treason. In my daddy's day, men would be shot for doing such disgusting behavior. It's an insult to the flag. It's an insult to democracy. It's an insult to this United States of America. And I am very upset and angry. All right, I hope some of this is penetrating into you, and I hope you will begin to become active to save your democracy before we have nothing left. Before all our money is given to billionaires and to Israel to murder innocent people. Really, my friends, golly, wake up. All right, let's go back to our program. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, 4. We are testing 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, thank you for joining us in another episode of Just Say No in the Electronic Intifada. We're glad you're watching. We want to give you a little announcement, which is we will be running historic news, old news programs, and these are archival. They are not current events, and so we want you to know that. All our news shows have dates at the beginning, so you can see those dates and know when that show was aired. So if it is archival, you know that's what it is. So anyway, we just want you to have that information. We felt it was important. And keep watching Just Say No. All right, you guys have a great evening, and I hope this show has been very educational. Thank you.
The War and Peace Report. I'm Anjali Kamath. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said Thursday the U.S. will impose the toughest sanctions in history on Iran after President Trump promised to wage, quote, economic warfare and isolation on an unprecedented scale. Bessent told CNBC that U.S. economic pressure would eliminate the need for return to direct combat with Iran. He said tough new sanctions would collapse Iran's government and warned other nations could face severe economic penalties if they continue to trade with Iran. Iran's foreign ministry condemned the threat of new sanctions as illegal and inhumane. Meanwhile, the USS George Washington aircraft government forces claimed 81 attacks over 24 hours, while Houthi fighters said they'd successfully used drones to strike an airport and an oil facility in Saudi Arabia. In Tunisia, hundreds of protesters marched through the streets of the capital, Tunis, on Thursday, calling for the ouster of authoritarian President Kais Saied, the release of jailed opposition activists and journalists, and the restoration of democracy. The protests come as Tunisia faces deteriorating public services, an affordability crisis, and a shortage of some basic supplies and medicines. Many of the protesters chanted, "The people want the fall of the regime," a popular refrain during the Arab Spring uprising that ousted longtime dictator Zain al-Abidin bin Ali in 2011.
So what message does that send? That mythical beheaded babies, because they were Israeli, are to be reported on when the incident never happened, but that Palestinian babies and children, when they're beheaded and their limbs are severed and they're found hanging from trees with half of their body missing, that they are not worth the coverage to report on their experience, on their premature death at the hands of Israel and the United States. Did you know that Israeli occupation forces tied explosives to the body of an 80-year-old Palestinian man who was forced to clear booby-trapped houses, and once they released him, they shot and killed him and his wife? Did you know that Israeli soldiers were captured on film raping a Palestinian hostage? And when news of this came to light, Israeli far-right politicians and soldiers and ordinary people protested outside of the facility where the soldier was being held, demanding that he be released. And in parallel, the Israeli Knesset engaged in debates on the right of Israeli soldiers to rape Palestinian hostages. One of the soldiers who was involved in the rape had a media tour all around Israeli media stations and took off his ski mask and was revered as a national hero by members of Israeli society. Did you know that a young Palestinian boy by the name of Saddam Rajab was killed in the occupied West Bank after an Israeli occupation soldier shot him in the stomach? Even though the evidence is right there, it was still responded to by supporters of Israel as being fake or being what they call Pallywood, because not only does Israel kill Palestinians with impunity, but Israel's supporters to believe that their ideology is morally justified when they do see images of Israel's policies against Palestinians. They just claim that they're fake, that they didn't happen, that they're made up entirely by Palestinians to claim global sympathy. Did you know that Israeli occupation forces recently killed a 2-year-old Palestinian girl by the name of Layla al-Khatib, who was sitting down to eat dinner with her family in occupied Jenin? She was shot in the head by an Israeli sniper. Not only did the Israeli sniper shoot her, but then the Israeli occupation forces prevented her and her family from rushing to get medical care, and she died. This, of course, is not an aberration. This happens all the time on a daily basis. Prior to October 7th, 2022 had been the deadliest year for Palestinian children killed by Israeli occupation forces in the occupied West Bank in 15 years. But did you even know about it? Did you know that in 16 months of genocide in Gaza, Israel has managed to halve the life expectancy in Gaza? If that isn't proof of genocide, I don't know what could be proof of genocide. Did you know that Israel withholds Palestinian bodies and prevents Palestinians that it killed from being returned to their families? Over 600 Palestinian bodies are being illegally held by Israel, some since the 1960s. Did you know that if you go on Google Maps and you look for satellite images of Beit Hanun, you will see that Israel has completely destroyed and erased that village in Gaza, that city in Gaza, and instead replaced all of the buildings, the stores, the homes, the parks, the schools, the mosques, the churches, with thick mud embedded with Israeli tank marks in the shape of a Star of David. Not a single corporate mainstream media outlet covered that story, thought it would be important. Consider, for example, as part of Israel's genocide, Israel has destroyed the overwhelming majority of all the infrastructure that is related to the provision of basic services like electricity, like water, like sanitation. It destroyed 90% of the housing units in Gaza. 90%. If that isn't genocide, I don't know what is. You can't possibly make the argument that the destruction of the majority, the overwhelming majority of all housing units in Gaza does not constitute intent to destroy a people in whole or in part. If you continue to get your information from mainstream media, I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't know any of these stories. But I think we should understand that if any one of these incidents had happened to an Israeli child or an Israeli family, then not only would the media be all over the story, politicians would be condemning it in the strongest possible terms, there would be widespread coverage and discussion about the horrors that that individual had endured. But when violence is carried out against Palestinians systematically in much wider proportions over 76 years, it is something that the global north wants us to accept as a reality, as a status quo, as the default. And as a result, evil is allowed to prevail with absolute impunity. After 15 months of a daily live stream genocide, we're really at a very critical turning point. Either the global community decides that international law is to mean something and is to actually be applied consistently to all offenders, no matter who they are, no matter where they're from, no matter the circumstances, or we decide to throw it away entirely. I don't see a middle ground because the Gaza genocide has exposed the double standards and the hypocrisy that is so embedded into the system If you take the example of the ICC warrants for Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, you've had states in Europe come out and say they're just not going to honor the warrants. Netanyahu and Gallant will be allowed to visit their states in total impunity, and that they won't comply with the obligation to actually arrest them and hand them over to The Hague. That's their obligation as signatories to the Rome Statute, the treaty that establishes the International Criminal Court. And in retaliation for the issuance of the arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant for crimes against humanity and war crimes committed in Gaza, the U.S., under the Trump administration, has sanctioned the International Criminal Court. That should make everyone stop to pause and reflect on who the good guys are in this and who might the bad guys be. The world that we're creating, if we continue to ignore international law, is a very dangerous world. It's a world where states' conduct is not bound by any notions of law or morality. It's a world where the only principle is if I can get away with it, then I will do it. It's a world that is going to, in many ways, resemble much of the death and destruction and killing that we saw at the height of empire hundreds of years ago. But also it's a world that's going to be much more dangerous even than that because of the ability now to accelerate and to automate killing and destruction through the technologies of today that we didn't have back then. Every single crime that they get away with is merely a precursor for a more egregious crime in the future. And the only thing that can stop that pattern from continuing is accountability. That's why it's so important for people all around the world to demand that policymakers and governments comply with their obligations under international law. And in this current moment, that means allowing for the reconstruction of Gaza by Palestinians for Palestinians without the interference or the meddling of the West. And international law requires that Israel unconditionally and immediately withdraw from the occupied Palestinian territories. The Gaza Strip, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, there is no debate. There is widespread consensus, and this was affirmed most recently by the International Court of Justice in its July 2024 advisory opinion, where the court held that Israel's existence in the occupied Palestinian territories is illegal. Israel's existence is illegal. That means that if Israeli soldiers were to plant flowers in Gaza, that act would be illegal because they have no right to be there in the first place. It's Palestinian land. The court went so far as to say that Israel's conduct in the occupied Palestinian territories violates a number of peremptory norms under international law. These are norms of the highest order from which no derogation is possible. They're the most serious violations of international law. Violations like the prohibition on apartheid, against racial discrimination, against violating self-determination of Palestinians, against the acquisition of territory by force. The court found that Israel was engaged in all of these extremely serious breaches towards the Palestinians, and that the only solution is an immediate and unconditional withdrawal of Israeli forces from Palestinian land. Now, when you compare that, which is what Israel's obligations are under international law, with the public discourse in the West, you see how far we are from adopting a policy that is compliant with the law. So this is really important. Israel must leave Palestinian land and has no legal claim to it whatsoever. Not to build settlements there, not to extract wealth from Palestinian land through the theft of resources like Palestinian gas off the coast of Gaza, not to take our water, not to do anything there. It has no right to be there, period. It's so essential in this moment to support independent media outlets, which are oftentimes the only source of amplifying Palestinian voices and supporting truth and justice. Support independent media, support Double Down News on Patreon. And if you'd like to hear more from me, follow on Instagram at GazanGirl and join our Patreon, patreon.com/PalestinePod.
All All right, thank you for joining us on Just Say No. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and keep watching. We really appreciate it. Keep protesting, keep fighting fascism and genocide and murder. Stop giving money and weapons to Israel. We, the American people, have to recapture our democracy and make our leaders live in the same realm we live in, and to follow constitutional law, which is what this country is all about, and which is the foundation of real democracy, which is what we want. Democracy, justice, human rights, and equal rights for all individuals. All right, keep watching. Just Say No.